Hey folks, here you got your host again, Derek, with third episode of the MSP Lead Gen podcast. Appreciate you giving this another listen. If this is your first time coming across our podcast, welcome. My name is Derek. I'm the host. I'm the owner of a company called Simple Selling. We do business development and manage marketing, content marketing for MSPs and just MSPs. We've got more important things to do. And this is just our third episode of our podcast. And in the previous in the first two episodes, we talked about we're still focused on cold calling for MSPs and best practices. In the first episode, we talked a lot, or I shared a bit on benchmarks and numbers and results for outbounds and for MSPs, and not just from our perspective, but also from our competitors, other vendors, and other things we're hearing in the channel. And then in our second episode, I kind of dove a little bit more into the importance of having differentiation clear from top down within the MSP before diving into the tactical aspects of outbound. And today, in this third, I guess, episode of the MSP Cold Calling Best Practices series, I wanted to get into a little bit more on the cold call itself. But what I mean by that is, yeah, there'll be a little bit of the tactical in the cold call, but also the context around the cold calling as well. So yeah, I'm just gonna dive right in, and I hope you guys get some good value from this, from what I prepared for today. So starting with basically the KPIs that influence caller behavior. That'll be part one. Then I'll get a little into the incentives that influence the caller and the overall conversation and the atmosphere for the cold call. And then we'll finish off with two sort of more tactical things to help with cold calling. So without further ado, let's get into the KPIs first and foremost. Before I dive in on these particular KPIs I'm talking about, just wanted to tell a quick story to kind of illustrate this a bit. So I last year got into using Peloton bike. And one of the things that I learned in cycling and in those workouts, for the cycling workouts, is a type of workout called power zone training. It's totally been transformative for me. So the way power zone training, works is basically, and this is a type of training that Peloton did not invent. This is something that elite cyclists do, and basically, there are seven different power zones, and basically the way these workouts work is you go in and you kind of pick. All right, do you want to do a power zone endurance ride, or do you want to do a power zone max? And they have different types of power zone workouts. And when you're in a power zone max ride, you're in for a really hard workout that's going to really push you to the limit. If you're in a power zone endurance, it's going to be a little bit less strenuous on you. And the reason I bring this up is because the way power zones are measured is by power or wattage on the bike. And the way you come up with that metric is based primarily, it comes based on the cadence or the speed with which you turn the wheel. So the speed of your legs spinning the wheel. Also by the level of resistance that you put on the bike. So what's great about this type of workout is you can't really cheat. So what I mean is, if you want to reach a certain power or certain watt on for the workout, if that's the target for, say, a power zone max, you have to have a very high range for watt. The only way to achieve that is by having a higher resistance or by really pedaling very quickly. And so, there's different ways that a biker can achieve that. And so the reason I bring that up here in the context of BDRs and outbound for MSPs is that there are KPIs where BDRs can cheat, and you want to avoid that as best you can. So some of the things that I often hear from MSPs when we first start talking about cold calling and metrics and KPIs to set, I'm often asked about, hey, like, how many dials are you guys doing per day? And while that is really important, it is a KPI that can be easily cheated. So what I mean by that is, well, I mean callers, they can basically dial and hang up, dial and hang up, dial and hang up. They can meet that target if you want them to, and you can be obsessed with that. But it's not necessarily going to get you the results that you actually want if you focus too much on that KPI. And so, similar to the power zone training, where watts is the most important metric to evaluate success or not of the workout, in BDR world, outbound world, we really want to focus on the metric that is appointments realized. Sometimes I've heard, oh, how many appointments are going to be booked, and so that's different from appointments realized. So booked means appointments that appear on your calendar or on the account executive's calendar to meet with the prospect. But if it only will count if the appointment actually takes place. And so that's something, if you're new to outbound, you'll find out the hard way, which is that not every prospect is going to show up for your appointment. And so it really has to be, the equivalent of watts for the power zone workouts would be for you guys appointments realized. So really important that we focus on that KPI. And it is important to look at the dial volume. It is important to look at also the conversion rate, and that's sort of going back to power zone training. It's important to understand your strengths as a writer, just as it is important for a BDR to understand your strengths as a caller, right? So you may have some BDRs that are very strong at activities. In other words, they're really good at dialing a lot, and that's going to be their edge. That's how they're going to meet the appointments realized target. On the other hand, you may have other callers who don't dial quite as much, right? So their volume is slightly lower than the first dialer, but their ability to connect, their ability to have a good conversation, business conversation, the ability to convert really into appointments is higher. And so they're going to get the same result as the first example type of caller. So you may not know what type of BDR you have when you're starting out. So you want to really focus on giving them an appointments realized target, a quota, and just allow that human being, that person, to discover their core strengths. And then you can tweak and adjust things accordingly based on their performance. Okay, so that was something I wanted to share related to KPIs and how they can influence, caller behavior, really, in that aspect. Second part of this podcast for today is to look at incentives and how that influences not just the behavior of the caller, but also the atmosphere of the call itself with the prospect. Because remember, the call is it's two people on a call. It's the BDR doing the call, and it's the prospect, right? And there is definitely a atmosphere, a spirit that you can feel inside any given cold call, and it's really important that how that atmosphere, how it feels, right? Because that's gonna determine the type of results in many cases. So I just want to tell a quick story to illustrate one of the important points. Um, so this is actually more of a personal story. So at the beginning of the year, New Year's resolution for my wife actually was to yell at our kids, our boys, less. And I can totally relate to that because we both lose our patience sometimes. We got little boys. We have three little sons. They're all under the age of 7. And my wife and I were both working a lot, and so I easily could have added this to my list of New Year's resolutions too. But my wife really wanted to work on that. And the way she set it up, though, is she said, look, she said it to our kids, look, every time, if mommy yells 5 times, I'll give you a piece of candy. And, obviously my wife has very good intentions with this resolution. However, I heard just recently while I was driving my boys back from school, I heard my oldest saying to our middle son, "Hey, uh, mom only needs to yell at us one more time until we get candy again." I just barely heard him say it, and of course, I'm kind of laughing under my breath when I heard this, and so unfortunately, something has a really good intention. You have a good goal. if the incentives are not totally aligned right, you may get these unintended reactions or responses or behaviors or results. And so when it comes to outbound and for the BDR, business development rep, right, doing the calls, here there's two big areas where I feel I've seen incentives and that they're not actually really in the MSP's best interest long term. So the first one is um, only giving commission uh, to the BDR when for the appointments realized, strictly on that alone. Now, it may seem on the surface like that is totally the right way to go, right? Because you want to incentivize appointments and you want them to be realized, and so it makes sense to add a little bit of an extra bonus for that. The problem is, well, I'll give you an example. So we recently got notified. We get email notifications whenever one of our MSP partners gets an inbound lead to their website, and so we all get excited. I got one recently, and I quickly went over to go into the CRM, into HubSpot, for our MSP, and to learn a little bit more about this inbound lead. And lo and behold, no surprise, this is an inbound lead that when I checked the history, that contact and company was part of our outbound in just like 2 months back. And not only had that prospect been hunted or pursued by our BDR, that BDR had also done a good job of of, of persuading or convincing this prospect to opt in to our newsletters and basically some of our marketing material. And that wasn't by accident. That was by design. And this has led to this lead, of course, being reminded about what makes our MSP partner great. And so when something came up, this prospect came back to the website and became a lead. So why am I telling you this story? The reason is, we look to incentivize our BDRs in not only the appointments realized, but also to not burn any bridges and to try to opt in these prospects into our marketing. We have various different ways that we train and that we make this happen on the calls that I'm not going to get into now. But the point is, there's financial incentives in these other sprinkled into these other areas. And when an inbound lead, there's even when an inbound lead comes in and we can see the historical performance of outbound, there's also some financial implications there for the BDR. And so when that happens, you totally you release some of the sales pressure from the call. You release you can kind of block Mr. Commission Breath from joining in every single cold call that the BDR makes, because the BDR is not feeling like, oh, I'm only going to get commission if I get this appointment like right now. Hey everyone, so before we continue with the episode, I did want to take a quick break just to introduce us better. So if it wasn't clear already, Simple Selling specializes in managed business development and marketing for MSPs. And one of the main reasons that MSPs choose us is because we bring two processes together better than anyone else. And here's what I mean. The business development part, the outbound, that's the first impression, right, that we make on prospects about your MSP. And we call it the lead capture moment. And the second process, the marketing process, that's to make a long-term good and unforgettable impression on your prospects. We call that the demand generation process. Because we do both, the outbound lead capture and the demand generation, and we integrate them in one system, your CRM, MSPs are really differentiating. They're really getting the results. And the other benefit is that MSPs can spend less time having to work with multiple vendors in sales and marketing, and they can focus more on running their MSP and taking care of customers and cybersecurity and all the other things that you guys have going on. And so if you're looking for help with this, definitely reach out to me and we can schedule some time to get to know each other. Anyway, thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and I'll let you get back to the show. Right? So that is really important, and I think something to think about. The other one that I wanted to share is around and in the MSPs, managers, presidents sometimes, or even vendors even that do what we do, is basically saying, look, we'll only get paid or book meetings if the prospect has a clear pain point, right? Prospect has to have a pain point in order for this appointment to count, to get an incentive or a bonus or something like that. And on the surface, this also seems to make sense, right? Because we're in this for sales, right? And we only want to talk to people that want to do business with us. And so it on the surface, it looks like a good idea. However, what I want to shed some light. I want to share a different perspective on this because I think, in our experience anyway, this actually leads to programs not getting the results that you want. And here's why, very specifically. So first, the problem with this is that it inherently ruins the first interaction more often than not. It could destroy the first interaction between your MSP and a cold prospect. And the reason is, when you require there to be a pain discovered, then that inherently causes the cold call to go longer, right? Because pain discovery is not easy, right? And no one, especially a total stranger, necessarily wants to open up about problems that they have or challenges that their business is facing to a stranger. And so the BDR is forced to try to come up to have more questions to try to extend this cold call interruption. And just by the nature of it, it's definitely not necessarily the right way you want to start a relationship with a prospect. So there's already kind of that pressure that's added there. The other problem with it, I'd say, is that when you're requiring it this way, the BDR is now more likely to burn out. And what I mean is, let's just say, let's say, and I'm just throwing out a number here to keep the math simple. This is not the actual number, but let's say a BDR is supplied with 100 new leads in the month to cold call and to pursue to do the outbound prospecting with, and only one of the 100 is actually in pain and actively switching or looking to switch MSPs, right? But the BDR doesn't know which of the who's the one out of 100 for that particular batch, right? And so the BDR could be every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they're making calls every day. First week is done. Second week, just rejection after rejection after rejection, and not able to connect. And finally, you know, maybe they interact with the right person on the fourth week, nearly nearing the end of the month. So I want you to think about what that experience is like for the BDR, who's constantly going through continuous rejection, and he's really looking for a needle in the haystack here. So what happens is, you can probably imagine that an already hard job gets even more hard, and that's when desperation creeps in. Mr. Commission breath joins in on the cold calls, and there's more pressure added into the calls, and that is just ruining it for everyone. And so now you're looking at the possibility of a BDR burning out. And so if you lose that BDR, that means all the investment that you put into him, it goes in the trash. All the expense that you had towards recruiting him or her goes into the trash. And so that is a very high risk, high likely probability if you operate that way. And to sort of culminate on why this is also, I'm also really against this approach, is that you're also going to negatively impact your likelihood of winning that business. And what I mean is, if you're looking for pain in the cold call, it means you're looking for a prospect that is already active, in the buying cycle, looking to switch their IT provider. then that likely means, if you land on that, say you get that appointment, that likely means that prospect has already done discovery, maybe even assessments with your competitors. It's not like you're the only MSP at that stage. And fatigue for discovery may have already set in. They may already have pricing, so, and you're kind of late to the party at that point in time. And when you're late to the party, that means that your close win rate is going to be negatively impacted more often than not, because they've already been influenced by your competitors and by referrals that they have received. And so, I think having that approach of only looking for pain and only counting it as an appointment if there's clear pain, is really going to hurt the long-term viability of the program, the outbound program that you're doing. It's going to hurt the close run rates. It's going to increase the likelihood of BDR burnout, and you're going to also disrupt the quality of the first interaction. So, what is the counterpunch to this, or what is the alternative? And so, what we're finding is that, for that it's better to have an incentive and pay for appointments as long as there's a meeting, as long as the appointment is with a company decision maker that meets your ideal client profile, target, and that person is willing to learn, willing to listen, right, to you, to learn something from you, something you'll teach this person. So you could be teaching something related to cybersecurity. You could be teaching them something related to business process improvement. You could be teaching them something related to anything that your company is particularly strong at that your competition isn't. And as long as they're willing to have that first conversation with you, that's a positive, learning, educational, high value conversation from the prospect's perspective, right? That's a great way to start a relationship. It's a great way to get in front of prospects that meet your criteria for the type of business, type of headcount, type of geographic location, type of industry that you want to do business with. But it may just be that they're not in the buying cycle right now. But at least you get in front of them and they could become a client soon. So let's say the example again, let's say there's 100 prospects given to the BDR in a particular month. Um, and it's that same batch from before, and there's one that's actively looking for a new MSP. So with this process I just described, where you're looking for meetings to teach, right, to teach and educate the market on something, right, this BDR would still get that appointment, that one from before who's actively searching, but he might also convert three more. So instead of you getting one appointment, you might get four, but now you have three others who may not be actively buying now, but they may have a security incident in a month that they weren't expecting. And who are they going to remember? They're going to remember you because you gave them value in that first call, right? So now you're getting more business potential, and at the same time you're not risking your BDR from burning out as much, because the BDR is not looking for a needle in a haystack anymore. Now the BDR is hunting, the BDR is selling a meeting, the BDR is not looking for pain. So that was something I wanted to share, related to incentives and how those things drive results and behavior and the e-commerce atmosphere with prospects. Just to finish off, just a couple more points here. Want to get more tactical stuff. And I know some of you might have been getting into this episode thinking, oh, Derek's going to share like a script and I'm going to be able to use a script, dude. Or I don't know who's listening, but we can't give a script away. It doesn't even make sense. If you were hoping for a script, it doesn't make sense, and here's why. I don't know about your MSP. I don't know what your strengths are, and you guys know better than I do. There's a huge spectrum. Also, even if I did know your MSP strengths and I had the perfect script, there is no script. You don't want to give your BDR a script, because then he or she would be reading it. And you don't want to sound like a robot. You want to be having business conversations. So, yeah, I don't have a script for you. And you're welcome, because that would be doing you more harm than good. All right. So, what do I have for you from a tactical perspective to help? So, let's break it down the cold call into two parts. The first part is connecting, or the obstacle is actually connecting to a decision maker, right? So, big surprise if you weren't aware, the majority of calls that our BDRs do, you don't connect to the right person. You're running into receptionists, you're running into phone systems, IVR systems, right? So how do we handle that? What are some things that we can do? Let me flip that around. What are some of the common mistakes that I've heard BDRs make when they're starting off? The more typical thing is saying too much, and speaking very quickly. So we really want to be, acting like and sounding like we know the person that we're asking for. So simpler the better. So for example, say, rather than saying, Hi, this is Derek with GoldenEye IT. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Smith, please. Right. The problem with that is you're revealing to the receptionist right away that you're with an IT or an MSP company, which never goes over well. Not in 2023 anyway, because everyone has an IT provider. And secondly, you're saying Mr. Smith, which makes you sound like you don't know Mr. Smith, like you're not familiarized, right? So instead, a very simple correction is just to say, Hi, good morning. Is John there, please? That's it. So you want to reveal less to the receptionist. You want to act more like you know who you're asking for. So a very simple tweak could have a pretty good result. Of course, that's not going to work every time, right? There's follow up questions that they ask. There's more experienced receptionists who can smell a salesperson from a mile away. But that goes beyond the scope of this particular podcast episode. But there is something that I think not enough BDRs are doing, and that's not just BDRs for MSPs, but BDRs and outbound in general, which is to embrace the voicemail. Love the voicemail opportunity. When the receptionist offers, "Hey, John is in a meeting right now. Would you like his voicemail?" Take it, because that gives you as a BDR the opportunity to have your voice heard and for you to for you to really have the prospect get a better sense of why you're calling. So, but the voicemail you could totally butcher the voicemail, right? So it's got to be done. You have to have a plan for how you're going to execute it. We give our BDRs like very specific voicemails to leave. Um, so our primary goal in the voicemail is to basically sell the sizzle, not the steak, right? Don't try to put the whole reason that you're trying to set up an appointment and all that stuff in the voicemail. Don't say too much about yourself or your company, right? All you're specifically trying to do with the voicemail is to have the prospect grasp that he or she has received an email from you and that they should go check the email, right? So the goal of the voicemail is to get the prospect to go check the email, right? So you could say, Hey, John, I just sent you an email with an idea related to X. Hoping to get your opinion on that. This is Derek with GoldenEye. Right. And notice a couple of things. You say up front that I've sent you an email or I'm going to send you an email and I want to get your thoughts on X. The X could be whatever it is makes up the question in your email, the topic of your email. And you end it with your own name and the name of your company, right? A lot of BDRs make the mistake of saying, Hi, this is Derek with GoldenEye IT. So if you put your name and the name of your company at the beginning of the voicemail, what are you going to do as an executive? You can clearly tell that is a person who is probably a salesperson. And so if you put your name and your company name at the beginning of the voicemail, you're more likely for them to just delete it before they even hear the whole message. So embrace the voicemail, point them towards the email with it, leave your name and your company name for the end of the voicemail. Those are your tips for connecting, improving connect rates. Next tactical And to finish off, bit of advice or suggestion. I'm going to read from one of our training modules, um, something that I think is the key to having a good business conversation with a prospect, and particularly important um, in the MSP uh, space, which is what we're talking about. Which and so I'll just read this. I'll just read this. This is not, by the way, this is not, this is courtesy. We get some of our training material from different places, and one of the influencers a lot for us for the work that we do is a guy who's called Josh Braun. I highly recommend you look for Josh Braun on LinkedIn. He posts a lot of great content, educational stuff for outbound and BDR work. So what I'm reading to you is some content of Josh's that we use in our own training. So I'm just going to read you this. He says, I walked into Fit to Run in the mall to kill some time while my wife shopped. I didn't need anything. My running sneakers were only a few months old. And yet, with one question, Liz sold me a $150 pair of running shoes. If Liz had asked, how can I help you? There would have been no sale because I would have said, just looking. If Liz had asked, what brings you in today? There would have been no sale because I would have said, just killing time while my wife shops. If Liz had asked, what's the number one problem you have with your running shoes? There would have been no sale because I didn't have a problem. Instead, Liz asked, when was the last time you had your gait checked? And I said, what do you mean? Moments later, I was on a treadmill. Turns out my feet pronate, and there are running shoes made specifically for people with pronated feet, which reduce the risk of injury when running long distances. Sold. Liz didn't ask about a problem, she found a problem. With one question, Liz got me to think differently about a problem I never thought about. Your prospects may not know about their problems either, or about what's possible. It's your job to expose areas that can help your prospects be happier. Are you just asking about problems or are you finding them? So, this is super, super important. I hope that influences how you think about how the conversation should be taking place and how to approach it. You want to be asking questions. You want to anticipate the problems that these prospects have, and you want to ask these questions in such a way where you get them to open up. And you want to sound familiarized with their business. Um, so you may be asking different questions to a manufacturing company than you would to, say, I don't know, some kind of company that's in professional services or like financial services or healthcare, right? So that's really, really important for having a good, working towards a better set rate. Set rate being, I don't even think I defined this, but that is the percentage of connected calls to decision makers that actually convert into an appointment, right? So that's what I mean by set rate. Sorry if I didn't explain that at the beginning. So that is a very important tactic there. Anyway, I think I've gone well over here on the time. I hope that this helped, provided some value. There will be another webinar that I'll be presenting on with Barracuda at the end of March. This is end of March 2023. I believe it's on March 28th. And so if you want to hear a bit more on the tips in the around tactics in particular, I'm going to probably share more in that webinar. But anyway, I hope that, again, that you got value from this, and I appreciate your time. Anyway, take care.